at 84, usually in our country, you would have people who have kind of given up on their life, because now it's like, oh, we are retired. And where do you get this contagious energy? What is the source? I want to know that.
Well, I think I just love life.
Yes.
And maybe that's what gives the energy.
So for women, what really works? You have to be having good oratory skills, or how do women up their game?
Today, I think women have broken the glass ceiling, as they call it. And I think they should just not think of them as women or men. Like, I never thought of myself as a woman journalist. I thought of myself as a journalist.
If somebody wants to be a great journalist, somebody who's still studying and wants to pursue this as a career, how can they go about it, A? And B, once they get a job, what they should do?
Well, first you have to love it, okay?
Hey everyone! Today we are celebrating a fearless icon, a woman who stormed through the halls of power in Mantralaya in her stilettos, challenging a world that wasn't ready for her. For over 50 electrifying years, she has been a relentless force, shaking up journalism as the longest serving journalist in India, exposing the most powerful figures. Her victory in the 1985 Supreme Court case, Olga Tellis versus Bombay Municipal Corporation, sent shockwaves across the nation, rewriting the right to life in India's constitution. There is no law student who doesn't know about this. A true trailblazer who shattered glass ceilings, became the voice for the voiceless, and inspired generations. She used her power for the right reasons. It's nothing but an absolute honor to sit with the legendary, unstoppable at 84, Miss Olga Tellis. Join me, let's celebrate her life together at her favorite place, that is Mumbai Press Club, with her favorite chai, the masala chai, and in the season of rain, beautiful rain, some pakoras. You ready? Let's deep dive. Welcome, Olga ma'am. Welcome to the PBT show. I am so honored and blessed to have you with me to do some conversations that will energize everyone's mind.
Oh, thank you. I feel really humbled by all playing me up so much.
No, not at all. Olga ma'am, the internet is full of all the information about your career, your illustrious, momentous 50 years of journalism, and there is so much that we will definitely talk so that the new breed of journalists can learn from you. But I want to start this podcast to let people know, and especially my audiences, who is Olga?
Oh.
How did you start?
As a journalist?
We'll go to your childhood first.
Yeah.
Who were you as a child? How did you think of journalism as a career? How was your childhood and your upbringing?
Well, as a child, I used to my heroine was Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, the sister of Jawaharlal Nehru, and she was at the General Assembly at that time. She was our representative. And she was my sort of ideal, and I said, I have to be like her. And, I was so young, I thought it's so easy to be a prime minister, and I always said, I would like to be the prime minister. So, in a way, I was always really political, and I loved reading. And then, there used to be a sort of tabloid, and the owner of the tabloid was a friend of my father. And so he asked me, would you like to write? And I think I was, 17 or 18 at the time. And I said, yes. So he said, okay, you do interviews of females. And that's how I started. And then, things happened to me, sort of just fall into my lap, I'm very lucky that way. And so I was in the lift one day going up to an office, and there was this person, Shalil Ghosh, and he said, we are looking, he was belonged to the Anand Bazar group. It's a Calcutta group. And he said, would you like to come and work with us? We've never had a woman, but you just come and we'll see how it goes. And in those days, there were women journalists, but they wrote on cooking and, things like that, soft subjects. So I said, yes, no, you know how when you're young, there's nothing you cannot do.
Right.
So I said, yeah, no problem. So I went there, and Mr. Sarkar, who was the owner, he never said anything. I mean, he just welcomed me. On the contrary, he sent me. I was barely there for a week, and he sent me out of town to cover the swim of Mir Sen at that time. He was swimming from the Port Strait to Rajeshwaram in India, to Colombo. So, it was like that. And from then on, it just went from one thing to another. And then, we were also, the Anand Bazar was the first to send me, like a reporter, to go covering things like elections, which was never done before. And so this way, and I took every opportunity. To me, there was nothing impossible, as I said. So I went, and that's how I saw the whole of Maharashtra. Of course, I went with the people from the CPIM, Ahilya Rangnekar, and in those days there were these very vociferous, powerful women like Ahilya Rangnekar, Mrinal Gori of the Socialist Party. And so, I used to go with them because they traveled for their own work, and I accompanied them.
And of course, they had the strong woman, Olga Tellis, also with them.
And that's how I got into journalism. And in those days, it was the Business Standard.
Yeah.
And the Hindustan Standard, which were later converted to the Business Standard.
Sure.
Yeah.
I remember catching up with you a few years ago, and what I saw was people would have seen the way you walked down the stairs so confidently. I know that you don't take any support. You walk on your own. You are always always asking me about what I should eat, what is the new diet fad that has come in the market. You take care of yourself. This is what fascinates me. I remember having a meeting with you a few years ago. You must be in your early 80s. And what I saw was, first of all, I was awestruck because I got to meet you after a long time. And it was, I have always looked up to you as a very, very inspirational woman leader. And then what I noticed, what was that? A happy 20 years something, getting excited about a holiday with a friend, going to Dharamshala, and all I saw was, how do you get this energy and enthusiasm at this age? You were all happy about going to Dharamshala with your friend. Let's talk about that. How was your trip?
Oh, it was great. It was really an eye-opener. We flew from Mumbai to Amritsar, and then from Amritsar we took a taxi to Dharamshala. And all along the way, it was so beautiful. The roads were nice. And we reached Dharamshala late evening, and we checked into a hotel. And then we went to the monastery the next moment. Of course, to me, it was an eye-opener. I always thought monasteries were like, little tombs kind of thing you went into and all. But it wasn't like this. It was beautiful, huge playgrounds and all the monks playing badminton, this, that. It was really a very happy place.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
What gives you this energy at this age, Ma'am, I'm talking about at 84. Usually in our country, you would have people who have kind of, kind of given up on their life because now it's like, oh, we are retired. And where do you get this contagious energy? What is the source? I want to know that.
Um, I don't know. Maybe it's, I do the chakra meditation on the seven chakras. And, or maybe, I've been doing yoga since I was 21, 22. And maybe energy, I don't know where it, um, uh, uh, but I'm like my sister too is quite active, and she's a year younger to me. So of course not as active as I am, but she goes out to her club and things like that, and every evening. And well, I think I just love life.
Yes.
And maybe that's what gives the energy. But I think it's meditation because when your chakras are your health centers, so when you concentrate on them, I guess it's a thing. And then I, of course, I believe in Mahavatar Babaji, and to me, he's everything. And maybe he keeps me well. I mean, if I ever need anything, I just ask him and he gives it. Mostly. Yeah.
I thought we will come to Babaji a little later, but I'm very happy you spoke about him.
Oh.
How did this relationship with Babaji happen?
How does it happen? Well, I think I saw this book and, no, sorry, an autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda. He mentioned Babaji in, I think, chapter 13. And it said there that if you say this Babaji with reverence, everything, it means everything to you, and you get what you want. So I kind of latched onto it. And it was so beautiful. And it just happened. And whatever I wanted, it just came. So like made life a cakewalk.
And when was this?
Maybe years ago, decades ago, I would say. Yeah.
I'm sure he has a huge role to play. And he also has a huge role to play in us sitting together today and doing this podcast is what I believe. Are you spiritual?
I think so, yeah. I'm not religious. I am spiritual.
How do you differentiate the two in your definition?
See, religious is you follow a religion and you go to church and you go do all the rituals, etc., which I don't do. So, but I'm spiritual. Like I said, I believe in Babaji, Mahavatar Babaji. And that's it. And like I do a lot of meditation. And that's it.
Let's go back to your childhood.
I believe in Ganesha.
Yes, everyone in
Everyone
Mumbai
believes in him. His favorite god.
Yes. You think there are gods present somewhere? You believe in their presence?
I believe in?
The presence of gods?
Yeah, I guess so.
If you remember them with all the reverence, they come to rescue.
Yeah, I suppose. So.
You've experienced this in your life?
Things like, whatever I wanted to happen, happened. Yeah.
So the presence was there.
Yeah.
As you said. How was your childhood? Were you good at writing? How did we understood that, things came to you and you were too young to just, feel like you could do it and you did it so wonderfully. But as a child, was writing a skill that you had or investigative journalism? What was it that you would recall in your childhood was a part of your profession later on?
No, like I said, I was always a political minded, and I loved reading. I did a lot. I read anything that came my way. I read.
How about your education?
My education, well, I went to St. Anne's School, and after school, I went to Sophia College, and I did my BA in English and French, and then I did want to do further studies because I got this job in the Onlooker. You know, this friend of my father's, he told me there was this job going in the Onlooker, and he said you can go and see Mr. Hamilton. He was a Swiss guy, and he started the Onlooker, which was on Swiss glazed paper. It was very plush and was all about society.
Right.
And so I said yes. I went for the interview and I got in, and then on I worked there. And I said then I met Shalil Ghosh, who put me on to the Anand Bazar group. And then, so I started with the Hindustan Standard, then Business Standard, and then Sunday Magazine with M.J. Akbar, which was very popular. And the fantastic thing about Akbar was he let you write what you wanted. You know, he never said, don't write this, don't write that. So I was able to introduce people like Datta Samant, or the trade union leader, and then Sharad Joshi, the farmers leader. So, we were very progressive.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you choose topics? What was your inclination when you were looking at topics to do stories?
You just saw what was happening. This, for instance, Datta Samant, the trade union, was very strong in those days, And so I went and met him. And then I used to help to write his press releases and things like that because I really admired him. He changed the economy of the industrial belt, Thane Belapur, because, they would give sort of 10 rupees raise, mostly engineering companies and big companies, they would give it. He came and he just upturned the whole thing and went into things like 500 and 1,000. And so I really appreciated him, appreciated what he was doing.
Right.
And so that's how. And then and that's how I wrote about him. And I said, Akbar was very nice. This Datta Samant had organized a strike in the Indian Express. And so Mr. Goenka told Akbar, look at this, you're the girl in your office doing all this. So, and anyway, Akbar put him on the cover and samjhawed him and things like that. And in the case of Sharad Joshi, it was a big movement. For the first time, he fought for farmers getting a remunerative price. The farmers, we have always, the government has always, every government has discriminated against the farmers and kept them suppressed and prices suppressed so that the people in cities got grains at at lower prices than what they really should be. And that's why I really I joined the movement. I even took part in it, in the movement. And it was a great experience.
I'm sure. Let's talk about your stint, a very long stint with Anand Bazar Patrika.
Sorry?
Your stint with Anand Bazar Patrika.
Yeah.
How long it was for?
I think, over 25 years.
How was it to be, we are talking about an era and closely we're talking about the late 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
When you were active.
Yeah, late 60s, 70s, yeah.
girls today are still not little underconfident, I would say. Even today's women, if you see, they have
No,
little.
today I think girls, because of television, we have
Yes.
more women reporters, and really they're doing, I think, terrific job.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
They do. And now with the digital
In
and
the
social media
business
also.
channels also are headed by women.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I still see women having little less confidence at some places. And we are talking about you in late 60s and 70s. You used to wear, there are stories, you used to just barge into Mantralaya all alone, reporting things, difficult things. How did you get the courage? What was it that gave you the courage to walk into your stilettos and go and rule the world?
I think I was so focused on work. There was no question of courage or anything. You just went there because you were working and it was your job. And I must say, all my male colleagues were very helpful. They were fantastic. And everyone wanted to kind of help you to explain or to be introduced to anybody. And, what I must say, I was sort of attractive in those days. So everyone wanted to be with you, kind of thing.
So, for women, what really works? You have to be having good oratory skills, or how do women up their game in the
How do
corporate
women?
world? Up their game in the corporate world. Anything that women should do to get the seat on the table, be able to be more expressive, be able to
Today,
get there.
I think women have broken the glass ceiling, as they call it, and I think they should just not think of them as women or men. Like I never thought of myself as a woman journalist. I thought of myself as a journalist. So I just went ahead, and I think women should do that. It's ridiculous to think that you're an inferior human being because you're a woman.
Right.
You're as good as any man, because there's so many dumb men also.
Well said. Not really that I know a lot of dumb men. I also have worked with very, very intelligent men also. But yeah, of course. Likewise, in any gender, they could be good, bad, great, little
But
less.
you're a terrific woman. I mean, just read about you.
So,
But
Olga
there's
ma'am,
nothing. You've done such fantastic things.
thank you so much. But coming back to your life, I want to draw your attention to your early days of journalism. How were you building your teams? As you said that there were very less women who came forward to become journalists. This was not the first, immediate career any woman would think of. So, how were you able to build your team? Who did you work with? Any
Okay.
instances?
Like I said, I started my career in the Onlooker magazine. First, I was a proofreader. I started right from the beginning. I was a proofreader. And then I graduated to subbing and then reporting. And so this Onlooker was a society magazine. So you had to attend all these parties. And so that's how I was able to build my connections, because you met these people at parties, so you knew them. And uh, there was this golf page. So you met golfers, you met all kinds of people.
Right.
And so it was a terrific base to start with. And then, like I said, I met Shalil Ghosh, who introduced me to Anand Bazaar. And they kind of welcomed me. And like I said, I was the first woman doing politics and
Yeah.
writing on politics. And then when they started the business paper, until they got a business editor, I used to kind of handle it. So, I was very lucky that I got these opportunities because I was the only one in Mumbai. Whereas other journalists, women or men, they were given certain beats in big newspapers,
Right.
like you cover Mantralaya, or you cover railways, or you cover shopping, whatever. But I did everything, whether it was defense, politics, business, anything. I covered it. I even I even wrote on sports, though I know nothing about it. But I had to interview Wilson Jones, who was
Wow.
yeah. So it was very interesting.
Let's talk about the best interview that you remember.
The best?
The best interview of your lifetime that you remember?
No, I like every interview.
Any specific which is warm in your memory?
Not really. Oh, I interviewed Osho when he came back from the US.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How was it?
Oh, it was very interesting because he was telling me how he was hounded out of the US because how their missionaries used to come here and deal with our poor.
Yeah.
But he in the US dealt with the richest of the rich. And the US didn't like that because, then their people would be converted, the rich would be converted or whatever was their problem. But they hounded him out from there. And so he was very interesting. I really liked the interview with him.
How was his energy that you met him? How was his energy?
Oh,
Was there anything different from what is the difference between, let me ask you this, that you meeting a person and you meeting Osho, what was the difference? Did you feel the difference?
yeah, the difference is he was a spiritual guy and he had so many experiences. And I had been to his institution in Pune.
Right.
So I had heard him before, and they used to do a column for us in Anand Bazaar. Yeah. So that's how, it was just, how was it interesting?
Did you feel the sparks of spirituality from him sitting live with him? Because it was very difficult to even get a glimpse of Osho. Osho was that big a figure. And if you could get to meet him personally and interview, was it any
Yeah,
experience?
because by then, he was so hounded.
Yeah.
So he was quite a different person from what he was in Pune.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but he was very interesting. I think he was very well read. And
as per your experience, what is the difference between well-read people who are who are business leaders or who are big politicians or driving change in the society and spiritual leaders? As per your understanding, what is the difference?
oh, I guess in the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
the spiritual people would talk differently, I even met one of the Shankaracharyas
Wow.
at that time, yeah. Uh, and he was very tall and he had wooden slippers and he spoke so well. Anyway, it was so long ago now, it's faded in my memory, but he was a huge towering figure.
Right.
Yeah. And
So spiritual leaders also need to be good speakers is what I can understand.
yeah, see, spiritual leaders are a different ball game.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that they would talk about spiritualism and of course they were very aware of what was happening.
Right.
Yeah, compared to say politicians and or corporate heads who would talk about their issues involved, what they would like in the budget, or during budget time, and so like to each his own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it is interesting to be understanding different mindsets.
Yeah.
You want to talk something about mindset?
Mindsets.
I hear a lot from you on that positivity, thinking, goal oriented mindset.
Oh,
Are these
yeah,
the virtues?
right.
You want to throw some light on that?
Yeah. Oh, one of the reasons I guess I'm a very positive person. In fact, one of my colleagues he used to say, "You're like a cat when the cat falls, it always falls on its 4 feet. It never, that's why it never gets injured. So, so even if something negative happens to me, I see it as a positive thing, as an opportunity to learn how not to do that or whatever. So I guess it's that. It's this positivity, I think, that gives you the energy and the love for life and whatever you're doing. And if you love your work, I think that's everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I loved my work. I would work 24/7. I never took leave. Yeah. I worked even on Sundays. So one of my colleagues, after a while, she told the watchman, close the gate on Sundays.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
How was it for people to? I have seen so many journalists, younger generation. Whenever I've met you, they are always looking up to you. They come to you asking, "How are you, ma'am?" And they are still looking. Rarely you see that even the younger generation has such immense connect with you. I've seen that with my own eyes.
Yeah.
What is this charisma?
Oh, I guess you'll have to ask them.
I'm
But
sure.
I remember there was one press conference, and for some reason I went there, and these young journalists said, "Man, you're coming to a press conference." I said, "Yes, you learn so much." I'm always learning. I love to know things.
And that is what you're saying at the age of 84 is so inspirational for the younger generation.
Yeah.
I have a very simple and a very easy question. I really want through this podcast. Not everybody who aspires to be a great journalist is going to get the opportunity to meet you in life. But if you could decode for the younger generation, if somebody wants to be a great journalist, somebody who's still studying and wants to pursue this as a career, how can they go about it, A? And B, once they get a job, what they should do?
Well, first you have to love it, okay? And love what takes you everywhere. They should be well read. They should keep a watch on what's happening. They should be very aware of politics. It depends. If they want to be political journalists, then they have to know everything in politics. Try to know everything. You can't know everything, but try to know everything. Or if it's business, then you have to understand the economy. And the main thing is you should try and catch up with people in the field. And I think when you're serious, people will help you. And that's what I found in my career. Because I was serious, all the male colleagues used to really help me. And that's what I think. If someone wants to be a journalist, they have to be totally committed. Commitment is one of the main things. Then you can be a good journalist. And of course, today, because of Google, everyone takes the easy way out and just goes to Google and takes
Copy
down
paste.
copy paste. And that's not what I did. I went down to the field, and in fact, there was one picture of Gregory Peck which said, "What happened to all the soles of your feet, of your shoes? When you go down, your shoes get worn out."
Yes.
And that's what he meant, that you should be that sort of a journalist
Right.
and not an armchair journalist. And today, a lot of people take the easy way out, like I said, through Google and so many other TV and things like that.
How has journalism changed? You have seen decades and decades and decades of journalism. How has it changed today? What you experience as journalism? What is the key difference that you see in the world that time and today?
Well, today journalism is more happening. It keeps in touch with all that's going on. And there's a lot of money that the owners have. So they can send journalists to, say, battlefields in Beirut or uh, Ukraine, and things like that. In those days, it wasn't so common to do something like that. And there is more reporting today, and that's why you see so much crime, rape, and really so violence. It's all this reporting, and you see some channels just playing the same thing again and again, which is very upsetting because it gives the wrong impression also.
Of the society, of the country?
No, that well, I must say that there is a lot of violence in our country, and there is a lot of incidents of rape and whatever, and violence against women is tremendous, especially in the smaller towns and villages where there are no newspapers, so
Yeah.
you don't know what's happening. I
Right.
remember, long years ago, the widows were treated so badly. We interviewed, somebody told us about a widow, so young. She was hardly about in her 20s, and her husband died. And they shaved off her head and made her sit outside, and all her food was given outside. All sorts of customs. That's one of the nice things about being a journalist. And of course, if you have owners who send you all over the place,
Right.
a lot depends on the owners. And that, like I said, my owners were fantastic. They sent me anywhere and let me do what I wanted. They kind of trusted me. And so one saw all this, and one saw how much of sorrow there was in our country, especially in the years that we had famine.
Right.
Uh, uh, the authorities thought of giving work like breaking stones and all. And you had these old ladies, their hands all creased and serrated because of breaking stones. Of course, now things have improved. But in the 70s and all, it was really pathetic.
Okay, ma'am. On the contrary, very well point you raised. From a journalistic point of view, or for that matter, for any profession, when you say that your owners were very cooperative to send you, today what we see because of excessive journalism, I would say because it's constant 24-hour reporting.
Yeah.
At one side, you said that you used to be loving your work, and when you love your work, there is no workaholic syndrome. You just love your work. You
Yeah.
want to do it. It's not that somebody is pushing you to do it.
Yeah. It's not a chore.
Yes. And what is happening with today's younger generation of any profession, be journalist also, there's a lot of burnout, there's a lot of fatigue, there's a lot of, mental health problems that are cropping up. How does one, as per you, deal with the situations when deadlines are there, you have to do things on the go? How does one think?
I think they burn out because, like I said, they are put on a certain beat. And after a while, it gets very boring, I presume. And that's why, as I said, I was lucky that I could do take up any subject I wanted to, because I was the only one in Mumbai covering this city and the state. So that's why they, after a while, get. Then it also depends. Like one journalist, I think, passed away because of the ill treatment by the editor.
was
Sometimes you
recent.
get horrible editors. And that's why I was very lucky to get fabulous editors.
And
I
what
just
did
was
you
very lucky.
So, was
And-
there anything specific when you were choosing people to join your team of reporters? What was the skill that you were looking for?
First and foremost, I wouldn't take people who were from schools of journalism, because then you had to
Let's talk
unlearn
about
what you learned there.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. And
What is it that journalism schools are teaching, mass communication colleges are teaching that one has to unlearn?
I don't know what they teach,
Uh-huh.
but it's just not the reality, Uh, I don't know. I suppose they teach something very basic.
Uh-huh.
And journalism is something. The field is very different.
Right.
When you go down and you really see what's happening and you do reporting, it's different from that desk journalism. Yeah,
That's the case with most of the B schools today,
yeah,
all across the country. Because the real thing that happens in the corporate world or business world when you're out there to do your job, so many skills you have to learn on the go. And
yeah. You have to learn on the go.
but when you are coming out of a top B school, you expect that I am ready to do the job. And when you join the job, you suddenly there is a break and you feel the world is very different. I need to now, as you rightly said, unlearn. Let's talk about in journalistic fashion, what were the things that one had to unlearn?
One has to.
Unlearn to be a
Unlearn.
journalist. Yeah.
Oh,
Ma'am, we want you to spill some beans and
no,
tell
I
us.
don't know what you have to unlearn. I don't know why. I forget what it was, but in the sense that you have to be more active as
Yeah.
a journalist. You can't just sit there and
9 to 5 job.
9 to 5 job. It's not a 9. It's the 24/7 job.
Yeah.
365 days. And you have to be always on the go. And I think what the journalism schools teach you is sort of very desk bound,
Mm-hmm.
And they don't really energize you, to use your word. Yeah.
Yes. Could you decode that further? What does energizing mean?
uh, energizing comes from loving your job and so giving it your 100%.
Right.
Yeah. Putting your heart and soul into your story
Right.
and not just saying, okay, you write that this is what happened today, they went there and blah, 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 blah. You try and make your story live so that when that person's reading it, you can just imagine how it's happening.
That is the most important skill in today's day and age because this is what we call as storytelling.
Yeah.
Any content writer who's watching this would understand that there is a type of content writing which is just write whatever you want to. And as you rightly said, the other part is you live that story. And when somebody is reading it, they become a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to teach people how this is done? Please give us some ideas how this is done.
Okay. I think the main thing is commitment. You have to be committed to your work, then you can give it your best. And you have to, it's a 24/7 job, it's not really a 9 to 5 job because news can happen anytime.
Right.
If there's an accident or a big robbery or something like that, whatever it is, it can happen anytime, and you can't say, no, it's not my working hour now, I'm off. You can't say that. I mean, that's if you want to be a good journalist.
Right.
Yeah. So
Any tips for writing good?
writing,
Yeah.
you have to keep it very simple. Like Gandhiji said, his writings are so simple that anyone can understand. Because if you want people to understand what you're saying,
Right.
and you want them to know really how things happen, you have to write simply.
Right.
No point in being verbose.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very important tip I
Yeah.
think you gave. Anka ma'am, you have inspired a generation of women to become journalists. Let's be honest. This is the truth. And I am unable to really, I won't say come to terms with, but did you have to fight with your parents to be a journalist or it was cool because we are talking about 60s?
Oh, yeah. My father was against me being a journalist, because he said in those days journalists used to drink and smoke, and
Yes.
he was anti those two things.
Mhm.
And so it's ridiculous. I said, I don't have to drink and smoke if I want to be a journalist and all that, So I just went ahead. Like I love fighting with authority. or and so that's how I became a journalist. Yeah.
Tell
And
me
it's so
something.
sad he didn't
Yeah.
live to see what I have done. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
But tell me one thing. Tell me one thing. When you say you are actually known for questioning authorities,
For questioning them.
authorities
Yeah.
when they did wrong or right, or you were one fearless journalist. You never, if it was and you had to question, you went ahead and questioned.
Yeah.
How did you get that power?
No, like I said, if you love your work, you're looking at every angle of a story. So therefore, you just ask the person whatever you want to know about, or question him or something. It comes naturally.
Is it a talent that one can hone, or it comes naturally? It's your confidence within you that you're easy. It's easy for you to confront.
Yeah,
What do you
you have to have confidence. You should not be intimidated because someone is a chief minister
Yeah.
or a minister or a big corporate head. You should not be intimidated. Then you're not going to do a good job, because you'll be half the time worried and scared. What should I ask? What should I not ask? So you should just go straight for the kill.
Very well said. How does one build this confidence? Give us some tips, please.
Like I said, if you love your work, all this comes naturally, because you want to give of your best.
Right.
Like, I never competed with anyone. I competed with myself. And that's how you sort of improve yourself in whatever you're doing and whatever you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You
Like
are
in meditation too. I did all kinds of meditation because I just wanted to.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, it began with a friend of mine whose father was teaching meditation and things like that. So that's how it all started.
Mhm.
And I used to wake up at 4 in the morning to do my meditation, half an hour. And this person taught me. And then from there, I met the Anand Margis. In those days, there were the Anand Margis. And they taught me their meditation, transcendental meditation.
Right.
And meditation really helps you. It puts you in another orbit.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely improve. We don't use our mind. We use only 10% of our mind. Meditation opens up the more avenues in your mind. And that's how it helps, yeah. Besides, it also makes you very intuitive.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it is working on different lobes.
I don't
It is
know,
said that
yeah.
your subconscious lobes are activated.
Yeah.
So if you were to, in your definition, because meditation is such a vast subject, everybody
Oh,
has their own
absolutely,
definition.
yeah. And
you
so
have
many
to-
different types
different
of meditation. Like for instance, this transcendental meditation was fantastic. You had to imagine this vast expanse,
Mhm.
and and it's fantastic because in this expanse, people were included. And you found if you thought of that person automatically called you. I've had these terrific experiences.
Can you elaborate this? What was this? This is called a spiritual experience. What did you just say?
It's not spiritual.
You were in your meditation.
Yeah.
How would you define transcendental meditation to somebody who knows nothing about it?
Or
Let's start-
transcendental
yeah.
meditation.
Yeah.
I presume because it means you transcend your immediate surroundings and you think of the vast expanse, the whole universe and everything in it, and you try and see a white light, and that's how and I think that's what you thought of something and it kind of happened.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel it used to happen to me like that.
You are a believer or acceptor of the law of attraction?
Oh, sorry?
Law of attraction? Have you read about it? Law of
No.
attraction?
No, I read your thing, law of attraction. What is it?
Threads into the same thing that we are constantly through our thoughts attracting situations in our life. So somewhere the meditation helps in decluttering the thoughts that we are not looking for, that we don't want, and creating space for the things that we actually want in our life to come in. So this is achieved through the meditation as a practice.
Yeah, but if you want something very badly and you really think about it, it happens. You get it. I found that.
Most of the people, when they want something very badly, their narrative gets into a little negative zone, which is, I want this, I'm not getting it. I want this, but I'm not getting it. So constantly the chatter is, I'm not getting it. I want it badly, but I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
So the law of attraction and the manifestation practice talks about shifting the energy and feeling, which is tricking your brain to feel that you already have this. So difficult it is. So difficult it is. But that's the practice that puts you into a mental zone to feel the feeling of you already acquiring it. You have acquired it. And what kind of feeling would you have when you already have it in your life? Can we talk a little bit more about transcendental practice? Do you practice it?
No.
Not anymore?
No.
Why did
Now
you leave?
I do chakra meditation because I think the Times used to run this, or still runs, the Speaking Tree.
Yes.
And they talked about this Chandrasekhar Patil of the Raj Yoga Spiritual Center Clinic. He had written this article. So I went and contacted him. And it changed my life, this meditation. Then he gave you the power to heal yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, for little things, not major things. You can heal yourself. And he gave the power in your hands to heal yourself. And the chakra meditation.
Right.
So he's terrific, yeah. And what else? Yeah. So
Olga,
the
ma'am.
like I said, the different kinds of meditation. I
Correct.
think once you get into it, things automatically happen.
Happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I found this, and then there were the Anand Margi, and then somebody else, and all that. It went on until this Chandrasekhar Patil thing.
So all the meditations kept you busy and you completely forgot about getting married. Is it fair to say?
About? No.
Getting married?
No, that's not. In fact, when I was very young, I remember when I was about 11, I used to see a lot of, amongst the neighbors and others, bickering and things like that. And I thought to myself, this is not for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Never thought of
And
getting
it's a
married?
lot of compromise, and, so I just said, this is not for me. And so I always said, I'm married to my work 24/7.
That's also a good place
And
to
your work doesn't let you down.
Absolutely. I'm sure that's why I keep saying that whenever I'm talking to you, I don't feel I'm talking to somebody who's your age. I'm talking to somebody who's absolutely in sync with the world today. Somebody who's as fresh in their thinking as a 20-year-old, and that is you. I remember you asking me, tell me what is this Quora, tell me what is this Reddit, and that is, it's so impressive. It's so amazing to be with a person who wants to learn everything what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
I want to kind of wrap up this conversation. There is so much that I want to talk to you about, but
Yeah, please go ahead.
sure. One question that is going to be a little personal question, but since you are an independent woman, by the definition, you are the real independent woman. Absolutely, And I don't think there's anybody who will fit into this definition better than you. Lived your life royally, decided for your life, chose a profession which was so unconventional, did so well in that. I'll come to your major, the case that you won and you created history. You keep telling me that, Poonam, I have done hundreds of things in my career, but then I'm known for the very famous Supreme Court judgment, the victory. I don't think there is any law student who won't know your name, because they all learn from your case in right their first year studies. The very famous Olga Tellis versus the Bombay Municipal Corporation.
Yeah.
What made you do that? What was it that...
Oh, see, one of the things that I hate is injustice. And whenever I see injustice, I have to do something about it. So there was this, the press conference, the chief ministers had once a week or something, I forget now. But Antule was a CM at that time, A.R. Antule. And he said at the press conference that on a Tuesday, it was on a certain day, he was going to remove all the pavement dwellers and push them away, which he did, He took them all in buses, he put them all in buses and left them far away. Not to mention they came back the next day. But I asked him, how can you do that? He said, you see how I do it. And I said, okay, we'll see. And when I came home, we used to have a little group that used to meet every night. And we used to discuss the woes of the world.
Right.
And so, I was telling these guys, I said, this is what happened today. And today is going to remove all the pavement dwellers, etc., etc. So this one fellow said, there's Justice Bhagwati, he just started this PIL, public interest litigation, where you can go and file a case on behalf of people and all that. So I thought about it, and then I went and I dashed off a letter. I just wrote on a piece of paper to the Supreme Court, and I said, there is our chief minister who wants to put out the payment. Then people come to Mumbai not to see Bollywood or they come because there are jobs here in Mumbai. You can't starve if you're prepared to work. And I said it's because of the wrong economic policies of the government in those days. They never developed the smaller towns and villages, only developed Mumbai. So everyone came here for work. And I dashed this off to the Supreme Court. And the next morning, the headlines in the Times of India on this, it was converted into a petition. And I was so shocked. I never expected that. And so I thought, my friend who's a lawyer, I told her about it and she said, yes, I'll fight the case. Oh, I must tell you, before that, when he was removing the people, there were two groups that went to court to say that they should not be removed during the monsoon.
Right.
And I was there. So when I came out, I asked my friend lawyer, Indira Jai Singh, I said, they are not here because of the monsoon, non-monsoon. Where do they go after the monsoon? Their jobs are here. So she said, no, there's nothing we can do. And that's why when I went in the night, I was telling my friends about this, what happened. And so then this guy told me there's this PIL, maybe you can try that. So I tried that. And that's how it happened.
Created history.
And
you went ahead to change the constitution.
Sorry?
You went ahead to change the constitution.
Yeah, they had to form a constitution bench to discuss this subject. And of course, they said there's nothing in the constitution that was anything to do with right to housing.
Right.
But they said the government should not remove the people unless it's for some public works.
Absolutely.
But of course, now things are a little different. Because I think someone said the slums in Mumbai can never be removed because of this case. But why make slums in the first place?
Absolutely.
You know, it's so inhuman.
Yes.
Like I told you, I went to see Shubhangi yesterday, and it was so sad to see how they live.
Right.
No ventilation and pokey little places. Sad.
What would be your message to the government today, if you were to?
The government.
Yeah.
Oh, they know. You have to, of course. See, today there's prefabricated housing. They can
Yes.
convert these into little tenements. You know,
I think there's something that state government can definitely
they
consider doing.
should. They should do. You know, one of the Chinese premier came to Mumbai, and Mumbai is supposed to be India's showpiece.
Yes.
And so they were driving in with the chief minister of that time, and the chief minister said he was showing in Mumbai. So after a little while of driving, the guy said, "Where's Mumbai?"
Yeah.
He said, "This is Mumbai," and he said, "This is Mumbai." Well, all the slums and all, they have to pass from the airport
Yes.
into this. It's amazing, you know.
And the latest Hurun Rich
Your
list says that
showpiece. You should do
Yes.
something about it.
we have the highest number of billionaires in
Yeah.
our country today.
Absolutely, and people keep coming to Mumbai. I understand 300 families come a day or something. I don't know if that's stopped now, but people come for a livelihood.
Absolutely.
You can't starve in Mumbai.
Now that we are talking about livelihood, I want you to spend some time on how one must look at their age. As I said, you are a very inspiring, obviously independent woman in the right manner, in the right definition. But, the retirement age is 60. Whether you are good, bad, you can work or no, you are agile, agility, mental framework, intelligence and everything put together at one side. But you would retire at 60 unless you want to do some freelancing work. So
You know,
how do you know you're 84, right? So what is your message from your life as a learning to everyone out there? How does one think of their lives when it comes to finance? This is my question.
Well, it's very important to save your money, and for a rainy day and for your old age.
Your longevity.
Yeah. You have to save, do a lot of saving. And because freelancing, I've done 2 articles for somebody and they've not paid me till today, and they claim they are bankrupt now, It's a website. So freelancing is it's a
Dicey.
mug's game. Yes.
How much one should save? Because you can't time yourself, right? Unfortunately or fortunately, you can't time yourself. You can't time your age. So how should one think of their finances?
No, like I said, saving. Saving is the most important thing. And where you can get an income every month.
Right.
You have to look for schemes like that.
Financial instruments.
Financial instruments, where you can get returns every month. And I think there are many schemes like this.
But do you think companies need to focus and create some more schemes or financial instruments, keeping the retirement age in mind and post-retirement benefits that should come to people?
Yeah.
Because on an average, the age has gone up because of the great medical facility.
In fact, I see so many ads on my mobile about jobs for senior citizens and things like that. Of course, I haven't tried that yet, but I want to see. One day I will try and see what it's all about.
That is what makes you Olga Tellis.
Oh.
The zeal. This is
I'm very
what makes
curious
you who
about
you
these
are.
things. Yeah.
So if I were to ask you and to my audiences also that there is a fantastic proof reading work, or there are articles to be proofread by somebody of your stature, would you be interested?
Yeah.
You want to work today?
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to work today because.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The whole lot of younger generation wants to retire. They want to retire early. Everybody wants to retire at 40. Why do you say so? You want to work?
Well, I would like to get some income.
For sure.
Because,
Except
yeah,
that.
I must confess I squandered my money. Yeah.
And any other reason?
Sorry?
Any other reason?
Oh,
Is
well,
it
I love
engagement
to-
of mind?
Like doing something, Yeah.
How difficult or easy was it for you to understand digital assets, like using WhatsApp or using
See,
digital?
WhatsApp, I understand, but over and above that, nothing.
But
The
WhatsApp,
digital mean nothing to me.
you check YouTube?
Yeah. Oh, regularly.
Really?
Yeah.
And you manage social media. You are able to do Twitter.
Yeah,
Other
yeah.
social media
I
platforms.
use Twitter.
You
I
like
used
it?
to tweet a lot, but I'm going to start again. I love tweeting.
You should. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And YouTube also. I see a lot of cats. I like cats.
Yes.
There are a lot of cats on YouTube.
I can see that.
So beautiful.
So Twitter now is called as X. And I'm very sure Elon Musk is going to be very happy knowing that a veteran of your stature loves X.
Oh.
It was so beautiful talking to you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for being interested in me.
Absolutely. I will always be, because I am very, very interested to know the stories and to learn from inspiring women like you.
Oh.
Olga ma'am, is there any message? As I said, and I'm repeating myself, you have inspired a generation of women, not just women journalists. Is there a message for the younger generation that you want to pass on?
For women?
For everyone.
For everyone. Oh, for everyone, I think if you love yourself and not in a selfish way, it will help you to love everyone else and do things for people. I think it's very important to help others. Like I said, you must be a temple where everyone comes to you and wants something, you give them.
Wow. How beautiful.
So, like I have one saying which I always used to keep: the heart that gives gathers. So I think, if you do that, you will be very happy. Yeah.
And a message for women?
Sorry?
And a message for women, working women who are breaking glass ceiling left, right, center?
Oh my, they could give me messages. They've already done so much by breaking the glass ceiling. Like I said, women should not think of themselves as women.
Right.
Women, men, like I said, there are dumb men, useless men. So why should you think that you are inferior?
Right.
Like there are great men and dumb men, there are great women, dumb women. So that's, you should have, like I said, if you love yourself, you have confidence in yourself.
Right.
That's the main thing. And you should have confidence in yourself.
Any tip to build this confidence?
Sorry?
Any tip to build this confidence?
To build this confidence. Yeah, to avoid negativity.
Mm-hmm.
Always think positive.
Right.
Always think positive. And like I said, women are so strong. Look at mothers. They do a 24/7 job, no pay. And they multitask. Do you have working women who are mothers?
Yeah.
They come and do the homework plus the office work. I think women are stronger than men.
You said it.
Yeah. Like in multitasking, men do one thing and think blah, blah. But women do, but they never appreciate it.
Women need more self-love,
Yeah.
self-care, and they need to look so beautiful the way you look right now.
Oh,
And the way
thank you.
and the way you take care of your health, and you want to be on top of your game all the time.
Yeah.
There's nothing that is stopping you, and this is such a huge inspiration to me and to everyone who's watching this. Please give your support and your blessings for Olga ma'am to live exactly like this for the next 100 years.
Oh, thank you. It's so beautiful of you. And I'm so glad I've met you. Not only because you're so beautiful, but because you're so intelligent.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Yeah.
Olga ma'am. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah, too.
Thank you.
Yeah.